I said to him, I said, well, look, my goal here today is to make sure every time you on shift that you return back safely. Our current operations on ground before I arrived was we didn't shoot at anybody, even if they shot at us. And so that's why people were dying. So I talked to the leadership and I said, look, if somebody threatened, I got rules of engagement cards. I'm gonna arm every one of these soldiers. If something looks like it possesses a hostile intent, I'm commanding them to shoot. Because my objective at the end of the day is not to lose one person and to bring everybody home. That's it. And I told that young lady, I will stand by you every day, and I'll make sure you got another person there, and we're gonna bring you home safe. The key thing in her mind was, I didn't want to sacrifice my life to go to college, as was other soldiers. She was no different than anybody else that I encountered. The world that we live in do not understand when you go to war what really takes place at war. They think it's something that's on TV, and it is quite different than what you can imagine. We need to begin to provide more opportunities for our youth so they're not faced with those decisions. Often we look at some of our communities and we think that sports is a way out or military is a way out. But joining those type organizations or looking for just sports as a way out shouldn't be a way, an avenue to avoid living in the ghetto, avoiding poverty, or avoiding growing up in a trailer park home. So, as I was deployed in 2006, and I just give you a little brief synopsis of some things that I noticed. And I'm gonna give you what happens when you begin to prepare for war. And those of you veterans, you'll understand this. And I've experienced this process a few times, even with going to Africa for Ebola. I get 36-hour notice, I'm out the door. So my affairs have to be in order all the time. Not much thought process in that. But when you go on a war, you receive 3 to 6 months notice, sometimes a year at best. And you have all that time to get your affairs in order. Okay? You alert your family. You increase your life insurance. Think about things I'm saying. You develop a care plan for your kids, especially if you're a single parent. I had to write one of those. You sign over power of attorney, so they have access to all your bank accounts, financial aspects of your life. And I pray you can trust them. If any soldiers leaving out in the future, I pray. Lastly, you sign your last will and testament. Now, if you've been daydreaming while I've been speaking, it just got real. When you sign your last will and testament, when you sign it, everything becomes surreal. It becomes surreal because at that moment, you realize that you have a probability of dying. So think about that for a moment. You have the probability of dying. So from a mental aspect, for me, now I'm the leader. I got 200 people looking at me. And I got active duty personnel looking at me too. And I'm a guards person. I'm in charge of all these people. So they didn't care if I was active duty or not. And I'm telling them get their affairs in order. I'm instructing them about power attorney so they don't get messed around. But I knew and I alerted my family that if I got injured, think about my mental process now. If I got injured at war, any type of injury, I was not coming back to the United States. So think about that. And if anything ever happened to me in the future, I would not come back to the United States. Because I don't want sympathy from nobody. And I don't want people to look at me as that I'm less of a man. I want to start somewhere fresh where nobody knows me. And they'll just take me for who I am. And not for what I used to be. And I tell you that story because you have soldiers among you who think like that. We have to come to grips as a society on how to address them where they are. So I'm glad I didn't get hurt. But I would tell you I probably endured some invisible wounds. Now you arrive in country and you start to hear sounds you've never heard before. The loud booms and the bombs and I didn't know what they were. Now for me, I'm a little tough cookie because I grew up in Chicago and there's a movie going to be featured, Chirac, that's going to talk about the neighborhood I grew up with, which is Inglewood. So I'm a little bit of a tough cookie. I just don't show I am nowadays. Unless I'm on a battlefield, which is appropriate. But at that time, I was leery because I heard a sound and it wasn't gunfire. It was bombs dropping. Hey, it got real again. I'm like, how come it's not a bomb? I'm looking around. I'm like, it's about a mile out. So does this stuff ever calm down? They're like, no. Okay. How do people sleep? And they like, it took you about 2 weeks. You become acclimated to the sound. What really happens is you become desensitized. You become desensitized to the sound, to the gunfights, to the blood, to death. And I remember at some point, I don't know where I was. I kept a ledger. I still got it somewhere. It documented everything from when I hit boots on ground, August 24th, 2006, up until April 18th. April 18th, I remember the date because 14 people came in from DC, all high-ranking soldiers, and somebody drove up with an S-10 and they let off a rocket launcher and they killed all of the leadership. So I remember that day. And then I said to myself, I can't go home. Because if they knocked the planes down at the air, how am I going to get home? And I'm also calming soldiers down. And I remember in my mind, I began to write poems with titles such as If I Die Tonight. One of my other poems said, the title was Ride on My Enemies Before They Circle Me Like Fleas. Think about where I was at. On one of these particular days, February 17th, I was shot at several times. I was going to check on one of those towers. And so I couldn't tell where the shots was coming from because we had a tall wall. And I had people in the tower looking, but there was a gunfight going down range one way